Be with you. Tonight I get to talk about my favorite topic. It's all downhill in this class after this. It's all the stuff I don't like as much, so I give it to Father Andrew to teach, or I don't understand it. But my favorite thing right now, it might change in a year or two, but right now my favorite thing is the church calendar and just all the fun and color that comes with that. You will notice most of you have something on your table. I borrowed these from the children from Atrium. These are to represent what? Those of you that have been around a while, what do we call these?
The stole.
Stole and vestments, yes. The whole category is called the vestment. Yes. Well, it's chasuble and dalmatic, and what's the assisting called that he wears?
Tunicle.
Tunicle, yes. They each have a name, the priest, assisting, and this is not even in tonight's class, but since you brought it up. So the one that goes like this, that Father Andrew usually wears, it kind of has a Y shape to it, yeah, and vertical, and it's more like wings. That's what the priest wears. The dalmatic, which is what I wear, a deacon wears, has 2 bars on it. There's a crossbar, 2 vertical bars and 2 cross bars. And then whoever's assisting, they wear a tunicle which looks much like the dalmatic that I wear, but there's only 1 bar. So sometimes you'll see, like, if we have a visiting preacher, like our fellow Jeremiah, who's not ordained, he can wear the tunicle with one bar. So this is a stole for a priest. So it goes like that. You've seen me maybe in mine, a deacon's. Same thing, but it goes cross and connects at the hip. So that was for free. And so why are they these different colors? Different seasons, yes. So that's what this is. Love a good visual aid. So we'll talk a little more about that. But let's first talk in general about keeping time with church. I'm a storyteller. I love storytellers. I love stories. I teach, I write. When I was a 9th grade English teacher, one of my students asked me one time, they were like, why do you want to do this? Like, isn't it awful? Which, reading their essays about gutting deer sometimes was awful. But I said, well, I love to read, I love to write, and I love to talk about what I read and I write. So why would I not want to do this? But I really love doing it because I love story. We probably all do. That's part of being human. We're storied beings. We make meaning out of things by situating them in stories. So think about that a minute. Think about context. We understand, maybe somebody at work rubs us the wrong way. And then we learn a little more about them as we work with them over the years. And then we grow to love them and just kind of accept that annoying thing because we know their story. You sort of know where their wounds are, their tender spots, or just their idiosyncrasies. And you know enough of the story to know, well, that's why it's the way it is. So if you think about the word context, that's what stories do. They give context. The church calendar, then, is the way that we keep time in the church. And what we're doing is we're remembering the story that we're in. So all this timekeeping, these liturgical seasons, these changing of colors, what that's doing for us is reminding us of our context, placing us in our story. So if you've been coming to Credo, and I hope you have, we've been studying the grand narrative of Scripture all year, because that's the story we all live in. God, the author of all history, is telling a story. And you're living your own little story in your life, and I'm living my story in my life, but those are part of His larger story. And there's one story from beginning to end, and the protagonist, the hero of that story is who? First class, yes, the bottle of red wine I had up here. If you don't remember anything else, that's what you remember, Jesus. Yes. So if you look at the quote on your handout, this is from David Taylor. We did his book on the Psalms a couple years back. He's a professor from my seminary. If the church doesn't tell us what time it is, the surrounding culture will. And we will usually all end up being the worse for it. Now, I'm not picking on anybody, but there is a season that comes in the South, and our culture tells us about late July or 1st of August that season is coming, right? And for many of us, it is a liturgical season. We are beginning to prepare for some worship during that time. Sometimes some of us, like if you're like me and you're an Auburn fan, it just feels like perpetual Lent when we get to football season. So think about that. Somebody's going to tell you what time it is, or another way of saying what time it is what story are we in? Somebody's going to tell you that. So is it the church or is it the world? Measuring time is just part of being human. We just do that. If you've ever had to give up your watch or your phone for a weekend, how hard is that? Most of us can't even sleep without either a phone or an alarm clock, so that if we wake up in the night, what? We know what time it is, because we need to know what time it is. Because if you look out the window and it's still dark, it's probably not time to get up. But I mean, it makes me kind of laugh. I mean, my grandparents were farmers. They got up at dawn. They kind of went to bed at dark. And it really wasn't. My granddad could walk outside and look at the sky, and he knew about what time it was. But it's an essential, or at least we think, an essential part of our lives to keep up with what time it is. So that's part of our story. It's an element, if you think about a novel or a movie, it's part of the setting, right? You turn on a movie, it matters whether if you're in the 1940s or whether it's current day. And we gather that information by looking at, buildings and fashion and cars and, those kinds of little details. Time is very important in terms of knowing the story. So we know what to do by what time it is. For example, in the morning you get up and eat breakfast. Yes, drink coffee. It's morning. This is what I do. In the evening it starts getting dark. We start winding down, get ready to go to bed, end our day. It's noontime. Sometimes whether we're hungry or not. Just been working 4 hours. It's 12 o'clock. We look at the next office over. Let's go to lunch. Because it's 12 o'clock. That's just what we do. So in the church, time itself forms us in the gospel. Now, how does that happen? That's a quote by, I think that's on your handout as well, by Tish Harrison Warren. If you're not familiar with her work, I think Father Andrew mentioned her the very first week. We've done this book here a couple times. We sell it in the bookstore. We just keep recommending it over and over. This is just one of the most accessible books on this subject that there is. Yeah, remember I told y'all about it? It's the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. She's an ACNA priest, and you may know her name. She, for a few years, wrote a column in the New York Times. So now Esau Macaulay, who's also an ACNA priest and a professor at Wheaton, has taken that over. But good for the ACNA. Got somebody writing, straightening out the world through the times. But she wrote a column for a number of years for them, and she also did Prayers in the Night, which is an excellent book as well. Anyway, a little commercial. I brought a lot of books to do commercials for tonight. A little commercial for that book. Highly recommend it. But she says time itself forms us in the gospel, in the truth of the gospel. So think about this and what she's saying. If we did not have Epiphany, ordinary time, Lent, Easter, Pentecost, ordinary time again, Advent. That's telling us the gospel, that circle. Every year we are living through the story of Jesus again and again and again. We are being formed in the gospel by the way we mark time in the church. In the incarnation, when God showed up in matter, fleshed in human skin, eating, building furniture, learning the Torah, once God showed up that way, nothing could ever be ordinary again. The whole world is shot through with holiness. God made it all and came and lived among it, and so all of our lives can be filled with worship. Now, if that made you bristle, you might be thinking, I don't know if I just want to sit around on a cloud and play a harp for eternity. That's not a good definition of worship. Or you may have even thought, I don't know if I want to sit and listen to preaching for eternity. That's not a good definition either. Think, when you hear the word worship, think of the word wonder. Think of things that make you go, in my case, things that leave me speechless, which is very rare. But seeing the Grand Canyon for the first time, seeing what was the Yellowstone that I just had no words and then I cried? What was it I saw? Yes, the geysers. I couldn't think of the word. Yeah, Old Faithful. Thank you. One of the few times in my life I was just in awe. Like, what is there to say? That's what worship is, when you're just wowed. Anne Lamott has a book called Help, Thanks, Wow. It's a book on prayer. She says every prayer can be boiled down to one of those three words. Help, thanks, wow. So you can never again to say, well, I'm just not very good at praying because I don't know the right words to say. A, we got a prayer book that'll help you out. And B, you can just use help, thanks, and wow. So no excuse. So worship, think of that as wonder. I don't mean that by any means to worship all the time does not mean that we're sitting in the sanctuaries and chanting psalms. That's the calling of monks and nuns. But every moment can be holy, whether we are a dentist pulling teeth or a builder surveying land or just paying attention to whatever's around us in our world, being present. If you look at the quote, I think I added by Leslie Newbigin. Is there a quote? I added this just this afternoon, so it's like I hope I printed the right thing out. All the faithful labor of God's servants, which time seems to bury in the dust of failure, will be raised up, will be found to be there transfigured in the new kingdom. Every faithful act of service, every honest labor to make the world a better place, which seemed to have been forever lost and forgotten in the rubble of history, will be seen on that day to have contributed to the perfect fellowship of God's kingdom. Have you ever thought about that? Every nose you wiped, mom or dad, or rear end you diapered, every meal you cooked, every paycheck you ground out to keep the lights on for the family, all of that perfected, transfigured in the new kingdom, every faithful act of service, every honest labor is actually not forgotten. That'll be a movie to watch, won't it? That'll be interesting to do in eternity. All the things that all of humanity have done. So on that note, my next book commercial, Every Moment Holy. I think Father Andrew may have mentioned this too. You did. This is the book that has all these liturgies for very ordinary things. So the very first liturgy in this book is a liturgy for writing liturgies. Appropriate. You have liturgy for one who is employed, liturgy for those who employ others, a liturgy for laundering, a liturgy for the keeping of bees, This is just a few. A liturgy for first responders. A liturgy before taking the stage. A liturgy for the changing of diapers. A liturgy for the watching of storms. A liturgy before consuming media. I dare us to pray that one. A liturgy for planting flowers. A liturgy for competitors. Maybe we could pray that one during football season. A liturgy for moving into a new home. A liturgy for the morning of a yard sale. A liturgy for setting up the Christmas tree. A liturgy for one battling a destructive desire. A liturgy for those who feel awkward in social gatherings. And that's just the first 2 pages. The table of contents are about 5 pages. So, and it's such a pretty book, but I commend this to you. And the idea behind it is that every mundane and ordinary thing we do, same idea that she has here, this is just in prayer form, can be shot through with holiness, and should be, because God owns all of time. The story is his story. So part of our vocation in the world as God's people is to live this way, to live in this story, to live in wonder in our ordinary, everyday lives. Now what that means, and I am preaching to myself right here, is slowing down. Because hurry is the enemy of love. And we can't pay attention when we're in a hurry. And to really love someone or something and to pay attention to it, it requires that we slow down and be present in that moment to whatever's before us. So I hope what you're getting from this is kind of tying into last week when we talked about the sacraments. Time is sacramental. Fleming Rutledge named her book on the liturgical year. She has a book of sermons that follow the liturgical calendar, and she named the book Means of Grace. Were you the one that told me about that book? Oh, I was about to thank you. I'll tell you about the book. You can thank me. You'd love it. Y'all remember we studied the crucifixion in Credo a couple years ago, if you were in that class. She's the one that wrote that. The name of the book is Means of Grace, a Year of Weekly Devotion. Time is a means of grace. So how does time form us in the truth? The church calendar shows us that. It gives us our context. It becomes that story that we live in. It's the way we make meaning of our lives. And so what these seasons are doing, hopefully, is giving us time to slow down and pause, pay attention, and think about a rhythm to the way we live our lives that helps us live that story. So for example, we sort of slow down, we think about repentance, we think about preparation in Advent, we think about longing, and then what comes? Right after Advent, what season? Christmas, incarnation, celebration, feasting, and then Epiphany. And then we ease back down and go through some ordinary time, and then we come into Lent. And then we do this again. Penitent, we're slowing down. We're walking through a little bit harder season of the harder part of the story. But then at the end of Lent comes Easter. And that is feasting and celebrating again. And we're way up here. And then from that, going out with Pentecost. We're missional from that. So there's this beautiful rhythm to that, sort of a threefold rhythm in the calendar. The writer Annie Dillard says, the way we spend our days is the way we spend our lives. The church calendar shows us how to spend our days, that we may know how to spend our lives. There's a quote by, if you're following along in Mackenzie's book, there's a quote he uses by Rabbi Abraham Heschel, in which he refers to the architecture of time. It's from a book called The Sabbath. He writes about time as having its own architecture. He says we build physical buildings in space, but we also build symbolic structures in time. If the church doesn't build the architecture of time, other forces are happy to do that for us. And he talks about in the early Jewish calendar how they built the temple was built to God in time. They marked these same kind of rhythms. So as we think about that, I want us to just talk through the seasons. The first will start, and this took me some getting used to when I first became an Anglican. Because all the rest of my life, which was a lot of it, the beginning of a year for me is January 1st, or was. And as soon as I started hanging around this place and listening to Andrew Rowell, he would just always, just Advent 1, Advent 1. Like that was the new year. Because it is. So Advent 1, which would be right here, first Sunday of Advent, first Sunday in December, is the beginning of the church year. Now, one way to think about Advent is like a flashback to a movie, like a movie that's a flashback. So like you start with a scene, maybe the first 2 or 3 minutes of a movie, and then all of a sudden, the next screen, you get this little phrase across that says 3 years earlier, or something like that, or 4 days ago. And then the whole rest of the movie is that. So you saw the end at the beginning. Well, that's kind of what Advent is, because Advent, we think of it as we're waiting on Mary to have baby Jesus. We're waiting on the incarnate one to come. And it is that. But it's really about the second coming. And it's also, it's eschatological. I've used that word before. It's transcending time. It's present, it's future, and it's past. It's looking back at the prophets, at the longing for the Messiah. It's looking forward to the Messiah in the present. And it's also looking for his second coming. So we've got all three of those going on there. The color, let's see, who's at the Advent table? If you know you're at the Advent table, raise your hand. Y'all are, and so are y'all. Good for y'all, very astute. So the color, it can be either purple or blue. The purple represents royalty and repentance. And you don't see the blue as much. It's an English tradition. But we do use it at Christ Church, and it's called Marian blue for Jesus' mother Mary. You almost always in art will see Mary wearing blue. I want to say a little note. Our blue vestments and our green ones were given in memory of Johnny Block. The McQueen family gave the green ones, and then the Block family gave the blue ones. And so it's just one of the neatest things to me, when we put on the dalmatic or the chasuble, it's not engraved, embroidered in the back. This was given in memory of this. And even that has such a kind of time transcending moment in it, because every time I put that on, I see that name. And I think about not only this person that this church loved that's gone on to Jesus, but also these other people that have given this as a gift to the church. And so there's just a beautiful quality to me about being able to see that and hold it, this very incarnational thing. But the Block family gave the blue ones, and so that's how we have 2 sets. We have those and we wear them. The call, you may not know this about Advent, it's a call to fasting, just like Lent. We don't talk about that much because we're busy going to Christmas parties from the time Thanksgiving ends, right? So let's leave that tucked away. We read the prophets in Advent. Glance, you've got a prayer book on your table. Turn to page 152. Each season, you'll notice this if you're really, really tuned in on the liturgy. Each season, we change something called the preface in the Eucharist. And if you look in the BCP, page 152, you'll see that each season has a special prayer. So one of my jobs, if you ever show up early on Sunday morning and you see me up there frantically flipping around in that book about 8:30 or 8:45, that's what I'm doing, is marking all that with sticky notes for the priest, so that making sure that the preface in your service leaflet is the one he's going to read out of that book. And that part of the service changes each week. So take a minute and just glance at those. Kind of notice what. Pass them around your table if you need to share the book. But notice each different season. And you can use these for yourself at home to pray during those seasons. If you're new to Anglicanism, I would encourage you to get a prayer book. We have them in the bookstore. Thank you, Lynn. It's free online. I can show you the app and how to get to that if you want to, 800-page PDF on your phone. I can do that for you. But I would encourage you to get one and just use it. And there's no right or wrong way to use it. Just use it. Look up those prefaces and just to get used to praying a prayer for the season. Get yourself used to that. I would also encourage you to maybe do something tangible each season if that's your jam, and it might not be. But when I was sort of dipping my toe in Anglicanism, even before I started coming to church over here, I was doing a lot of reading about it. And I just wanted to do things to help myself remember the season. And so during Advent, I would do a centerpiece on the dining room table, with some green plants, and then I'd go get purple hyacinths or something purpley to remind me, or purple candle, that I'm in Advent and this is the color. And then, when Epiphany came, I had, white flowers or just whatever equivalent that would be for some of you, some of you that would not be flowers on your dining room table or plants or anything. But finding ways to, like Pentecost, I had these 3 little white birds I found, and I just put them out on the kitchen cabinet because 3 little white doves, and that was just kind of my little thing. And it just sat there for 50 days, and I think I put a cross in the middle or something. But just finding ways. That's why I brought all this down from the children's rooms upstairs. I think it's so helpful if we have tangible stuff that reminds us, oh, I'm in Pentecost, or oh, I'm in Lent. Because again, the culture is telling us every day from the November 29th on, eat, drink, feast, party, all that. It is very difficult and very countercultural to actually walk through the story of Advent. One thing we do here is we make Advent wreaths. If you're new to Christ Church, we do it on that person. Yeah.
Coming from Episcopal Church, why do we have white candles instead of the pink and purple?
They probably, in order to just, give all the supplies to everybody for $10 or less. Oh, and the big one in there, I don't know that. I don't know. That's a great question. I'll find out. At my old church, we actually had the colored ones. And we were Presbyterian. Yeah. I'll find out. I don't know. I hadn't thought about that. They were, yeah. I know when we make the Advent wreaths, we do that, but I think that's just kind of, people can change them out at home if they want to. Yeah, I like that. Good for you. See, fellow traveler right there. You need your stuff. Yeah, I do too. Yeah, let's ask about that. When Father Andrew comes in tonight, hit him up. We're going to hit him up with that. I don't even think I've noticed that. I'm so glad you said that. Obviously, I'm moving too fast, right? All right, so from Advent, we go to Christmas. And Christmas season starts when in the church here? Got a newbie over here. Starts on December 25th. So y'all know that song, The 12 Days of Christmas? That's a thing. That's a real thing. That's not just a fun song that we all learned in elementary school. The 12 days of Christmas start on December 25th, and they run until January 5th. And what we're doing there is retelling the story of incarnation. This is the season where heaven and earth meet. The color, we move to white. It's a festival of Christ. So it's white. Of course, white represents the purity of Jesus, cleansing. January 5th is called 12th night. That's the last day of Christmas. Sometimes we don't always do this. Our former music director, Thomas Bowers, loved to do 12th night and have a Christmas tree burning thing. And so occasionally when Thomas could pull that together, we'd do that. It's not a thing we always do. But you could do that for yourself. You could have your own little 12th night celebration.
What do you mean burning?
Just burning the trees. Like a big bonfire, yeah. Yeah. We usually take our tree down on that day or even maybe wait till Epiphany. And this was one of the things that Geis and I figured out, like, was kind of just an excuse. We found an excuse for our procrastination. Because once you work that hard, first of all, we put up 2 Christmas trees because I have certain things I want on my tree.
People don't mind having fake trees.
I don't mind a fake tree. I like a fake tree. I have a tree that has all like red birds and crosses and like all things that, remind me of the goodness of God. And he has a lot of goodness of God on his live tree too, but he also has like every tacky thing we've ever bought on vacation or our children have made that is disintegrated because they are about to be 30 and 32, but we still keep hanging it on the tree. And we've been married so long that it's more than one tree could hold anyway. So a few years ago, we decided the secret to the next 30-something years might be just do 2 trees, You do your live tree, you clean up the needles, I do my fake tree. Plus mine is pre-lit with all white lights, and he's like a C67 or C9s, yeah, the big fat color lights. So I don't know why I got off on trees. Oh, so we have always, we do all that work. We don't want to take the tree down on December 26th. And so when we found out that Anglicans did this all the way to January 5th with their trees, we're like, oh, what's this is meant to be? Works beautifully. So us just wanting to keep the tree, that just fit right in, and we probably should have been here all along. But one other thing I'll say about that season briefly, hymns. That is hard for some people to get used to because we don't start singing the Christmas hymns on Sunday after Thanksgiving. We sing Advent hymns. And so you have to wait all the way to Christmas, which is a good reason to come as many times as you can come around Christmas and through. But we'll sing them. We'll be singing Hark the Herald, all the way to January 5th. But that's hard for some folks to get used to. But again, this all goes back to where I started with, this is part of living the story. And if you've ever gone on a diet in your life, you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes things taste better if you don't let yourself have it every day. That's kind of what this is like. That's kind of what Advent and Lent do for us. The feasting is really feasting when you've put yourself through the rigor of an Advent or a Lent as it was designed to be. So again, don't get legalistic about it. Yes, we've all been to the company party on December the 8th and the celebration at school on December the 5th, and we'll continue to. But find ways to remind yourself and let yourself experience that longing. That's a lot of what we want to think about in Advent is your longing for Christmas. And then when Christmas comes, finally can play Hark the Herald by the London Philharmonic as loud as I want to with the big old honking lights on that live tree that's making a mess. Epiphany, January 6th. It's both a day, it's a feast day, and it's also a season. The word Epiphany means revelation. If you think about on Epiphany, we bring the wise men down. We do our manger scene and we bring the wise men down. Jesus is the Savior of the world. We're celebrating that day. He's not just to the Jews, but to the Gentiles as well. The Magi were Gentiles. The first Sunday after that is the celebration of the baptism of Jesus. Usually the text is also read. The wedding feast of Cana is usually the gospel reading on that day. So still very celebratory in that season. Other Sundays that follow, the theme is still around Revelation. And then the final Sunday is Transfiguration Sunday. The color is white if it's a feast day like Transfiguration or the baptism of our Lord. Or if January 6th happens to fall on a Sunday. If not, green. You'll see us wearing green. So who's at the Epiphany? There should be 2 tables that could be Epiphany. There you go, green and white. There you go. So green and white. So then, I've already alluded to this a little bit, we move to Lent. Lent begins with what day? Ash Wednesday. Has everybody been to an Ash Wednesday service at some point in your life somewhere? Yeah, some of y'all, lots of them, I bet. Yeah, the first time I ever attended one, when you are sitting in silence and you hear over and over and over the priests say, ashes, from dust to dust you shall return, to dust you shall return. From dust you came, to dust you shall return. It just, as you sit there and you hear that just echoing over and over, there's no background music or anything. It is amazing and powerful. And I don't know if you've ever heard Father Andrew talk about the first time he marked one of his boys with ashes. How hard that was to say that over his own child, mark him with the ashes. I love that day. It's a reminder of our mortal nature. It's an important day. I feel like we could probably use about 8 Ash Wednesdays a year because we need to live like we're dying, because we are. And we need to live with that awareness of how fragile our lives are and that they do come to an end. So that's what we do. We begin Lent, and it's 40 days, and this is aligning with Jesus' 40 days in the desert. It's a season of prayer, fasting, self-denial. We often take up spiritual disciplines or spiritual practices, not because we're trying to earn our salvation. We can't earn it. We already have it. But because we want God to show us things in our lives that might be hindering our enjoyment and experience of Him, things that are getting in our way. Or maybe we are interceding for someone else. And so we choose practices, we take up things. It is not a have to. It should be a want to, but not a have to. And I don't even mean it should be like you should. I mean, if you choose to practice something or give up something, people often say, if you choose to do that because the Holy Spirit's led you to do that, and there's something good in it. So this was one that I started doing before I was actually Anglican. And I told y'all that I love to read and I love to write and I love to talk and all things words. I just love words. And so one of the hardest things I ever felt like that the Lord was leading me to do during the Lent was to give up reading anything except my Bible and not writing anything except just my own prayers in my journal. I mean, not a magazine, not an article, not a newspaper, not a book. I failed a few times. I'll just go ahead and tell you that. I've failed Lent a lot in my life. I really have. There's no such thing as a report card for Lent, but if there were, I've failed it more than I've passed it. But that's really not the point. The point is not to make it the 40 days. The point might be to experience your failure. Because when you experience your failures a few times, and then you get to Easter, you realize that's all taken care of. That's all redeemed. That all the power we need, 1 Corinthians 1, all the power we need is in the cross. It is in our weakness that He's strong. So I kind of like Lent now that I'm talking about it. I'm thinking, looking forward to it.
But we do get a break.
We do, and that was my next bullet point, Mose. Talk about that. No, give us a few good examples. What's our break?
Well, I mean, Sunday is a feast day during Lent, and so you can break your fast.
Yes.
during, or whatever it is, whatever
Your practice,
you
yeah.
do, whatever you decide to take on or whatever, on each Sunday. Now, people think that's cheating, but it's because it's actually 45 days or something.
That is right.
Between Ash Wednesday and Easter, and so that extra day, those extra 5 days, the Sundays don't count.
Yes, and this is why I would encourage you to not dip your toe in for a long time like I did and play Anglican, but to actually become one, because that's like a little insider secret. Because I didn't know that.
It's a hack.
It's a hack. I did not know that. Like all this time I was like doing it and thinking, and then I got in the church and they were like, oh no, you don't do it on Sundays. I was like, you don't? This is great. I can have dessert on Sunday. Yes.
If we can keep Jewish hours during Lent, Sunday actually starts Saturday night.
There you go. See, you want to, if you're new to this, these are the people you want to talk to. Give me the hacks, yeah. Well, and isn't that so like God? To, not that he made up Lent, he didn't, we did, but there's that one day in 7, that day of rest. Cease from striving, cease from groveling, whatever you're doing, and just rest and enjoy me and what I have given you. That's what these days says. And that was another thing, just Sundays in general, until I became an Anglican, I just didn't, Sunday was just Sunday, and frankly, in some of the backgrounds I've been in, it felt like a work day. And I was not an employee or an ordained person in a church. I was a volunteer, just like most of you. But I was involved in a lot of things, and everything got, it's Sunday school and church and singing in the choir, and then the committee meetings that started at 4, and then a committee meeting at 5, and then night church at 6, and then the fellowship thing after the night church. And I mean, it was more exhausting than a work day. And that didn't feel anything like a feast day or a celebration. And that's one of the things I've really loved and embraced in this church, is that idea that I really want to think about it as, not what can I not do because it's Sunday. I mean, I grew up, my mom, there were blue laws and all that back then because I'm really old. But like, she did not want my dad to take the boat out and like go fishing, even though we went to Sunday school and church, and we were going to go to this thing called training union at night and then night church. So we just had this little window of about 4 hours, but my dad would want to take us out and either take us fishing, my sister and me, or water skiing. And I mean, she put a hex on him. Did not want to. And that's not even really work, but it was so ingrained, like, you don't do these things on Sunday. You go to church, you go eat with the family, and then you can take a nap. But that was it. So y'all can see where I was like a bird out of a cage. Like, what do you mean we get to have a party on Sunday? This is great. And you still do during Lent, because we are always on Sunday, we're feasting and celebrating the resurrection every single Sunday. Again, on a little weekly basis, and this was set up in Genesis. This is the created order, that on Sundays we rest and enjoy the goodness of God. We rest from our labors. We rest from trying to prove ourselves, not just from cutting the grass and not driving a boat. It's not that. It's resting in what God has done for us. And that is worthy of going out and having a nice meal, taking a nap, taking a boat ride, whatever your thing is, being with your people you love, eating something really special, whatever that is. Make it a thing. Make that a thing in your life. Feast on Sunday. Spent a lot more time on that than I did the actual hard part of Lent. Look at page 605 in your BCP. Those are some collects for Lent. And I just want you to know where they are. Those are just prayers that you can pray during that season. And Lent, we sort of share purple and blue, but in Lent the color is purple. So these are the Lent Yes, you're the purple. And then Lent, the final week is Holy Week, and you're all familiar with that. Lent actually, Holy Week will end on sunrise Easter morning. So it starts with Palm Sunday, and we have on Thursday Holy Communion. We strip the altar. Here at this church, we do optional foot washing during the Holy Communion. You can leave and, is it during Communion? You leave and come in here, Mose? And the vestry of the church. Yeah.
Didn't Jesus just wash the feet of the apostles?
Yes.
Well, why don't we wash everybody's feet?
Well, I think the idea there is that we are all we're all his disciples. He said, go into all the world and make disciples.
Pick 12 of the vestry and wash their feet with that.
Well, the vestry, if you think about like the apostolic tradition, you would just be thinking about bishops. Like you would have, if you were literally replicating, well, apostles, modern day apostles would. Well, I think in Jesus' act, what he's demonstrating there is his commonness, his humility, by being a servant, doing the lowest of the low. He's being a deacon there, FYI. That's what the deacon does. We're seeing him be diakonos.
He's doing something for people that in a grand sense are not on the same level as him.
Yeah.
You know, like they're not Jesus. They are just his disciples. He's washing their feet. They in turn are going to go and wash other people's feet who are similarly situated, who are not their superiors, but they're, quote, inferiors.
Yeah. So putting himself beneath them. It is not something you have to do. If what I just said makes you go, ooh, don't worry about it. You can stay right in there and meditate and pray, and you'll never even know what's going on. I did it for the first time last year, and I was serving, so I came in here in my vestments. What made me get up and do it was, Father Andrew had told us, because if y'all want to do it and you're serving, we'll make time. You can. And I was sitting there in my box, and I saw one of the 6th grade boys that I had worked with in student ministry get up and come back here. And I thought, well, if he's going to do it, I'm doing it. If he can do it, I can do it. And I got up and came in here, and it was really one of the sweetest experiences I've had in this church.
Did you find it humbling?
I did, and I'll tell you another thing. Lynn was in my Tuesday Bible study, and she had said, I can't wait to see how did you say it?
Who washes my feet?
Who washes my feet, meaning Jesus is really washing my feet, but it'll be somebody in this church's face. And she had said that on Tuesday, and I thought, what if there's someone particular that God has chosen for me? And sure enough, the vestry member that washed my feet was somebody that was my across the street neighbor 30 years ago, before this church was started. She was a founding member of this church, and she had given me my first prayer book. You cannot make that up. You cannot make that up. So I commend that to you. We'll wind up. Good Friday. If you've never walked Stations of the Cross, we do that. You can do it out in the chapel in the woods. It's a wonderful experience. Good Friday service. Holy Saturday, we have an Easter Vigil, one of the neatest services you will ever see. You may not have ever heard of it. You go from darkness to light in that service. I'm not going to say more because I want you to be surprised. Afterwards, it's Easter because the sun's down, and we celebrate with chocolate-covered strawberries and champagne. So there you go. It is Easter by 9 o'clock on Saturday night. So Easter Vigil, I commend it to you. Easter is actually not just a day, but 50. It's a season. It's a season of joy and feasting. So all that deprivation of Lent, you can eat your Easter candy and enjoy and give thanks to God for it. 40 days after Easter, we celebrate Ascension Day. Of course, the color's white all during that season. And then comes Pentecost. And you'll notice this little red square right here. If you were here last year, Mimi, after many years, finally talked Father Andrew into letting her, and Mary Beth, was it you that did it with her? Yeah. 2 years now they've done it. They process these beautiful banners that look like flames over our heads, just again to remind us of what happened at Pentecost. The Spirit fell, the tongues of fire on people's head. The color, of course, red, we like to think of that as the birthday of the church. The church was born on the southern steps of the temple, is that right? In Jerusalem. So after the resurrection of Jesus, Pentecost is linked to the law giving on Sinai and the Spirit, as I just said, coming and descending in Jerusalem. This is, you'd think of Pentecost as a reversal of the Tower of Babel in the Old Testament. Pentecost is the kingdom has now come. That is getting put back. It empowers all Christians to minister the word. So if you're from a tradition that uses that phrase, priesthood of the believers a lot, which is right out of Hebrews, biblical, think about that. That's what Pentecost, we're celebrating that all of us have gifts. All of us are called to be ministers. Trinity Sunday is the Sunday after Pentecost, and the pastor should always instruct us on the doctrine of the Trinity. The priest should always instruct us on that. Ordinary time, green. Where are my ordinary time? They're my ordinary time people. So after Trinity Sunday till the Sunday before Advent, that's the last Sunday before Advent is this Sunday right here is Christ the King Sunday. So this whole section is ordinary time. It is not called ordinary time because it's just ordinary. The green is for continual growth. This is where from the Pentecost, the church grows. That's the part of the story we're living in. So we want to be thinking during that time about being missional. Where has God planted me? The color green. How is he not just growing me, but how's he growing the church through me? How am I being missional? That's the way we want to think about it. That's a great time to wonder. You can get outside in that season of the year and wonder and worship. It's called ordinary time because it's numbered time. That's all that is. All Saints' Day is the first Sunday in November. We celebrate the departed. It's the Sunday after Halloween, if you celebrate Halloween. In our tradition, we make banners. If you've been here, we make banners for people, family members of parishioners who've died during that year. We commemorate them. We pray for them. They're processed. We put them up at the front of the church. And the color, we always wear white on All Saints' Day. And then that last Sunday, so All Saints' Day would fall about right here, and then that last Sunday before we start Advent again is Christ the King. So that takes us all the way around. So we've gone from waiting for Jesus in three senses to the incarnation, the birth of Jesus, death, resurrection. Jesus sends us the Spirit, the church is flourishing and growing, and we're all the way right here to He is King Jesus. And then we start again every year. So there's even more feasts and festivals we could talk about, but this is kind of an intro class, and that's enough for now. And Cindy's putting dessert out back there, and we have 1 minute left. So next time you wonder what time it is, don't pick up your phone, don't look at the clock, ask the church what time it is. All right, go in peace to love and serve the Lord. If you have questions, I'll entertain them individually because The natives are at the door wanting food.